Andy and I, we were going to talk about something else, and in prep for this, we ended up in a debate, and we figured we paused and we were like, hey, this is probably something other people are thinking about. Maybe it's worth sharing. And full honesty, we don't know what the answer is here, which is, does AI replace employees?
Welcome to another episode of AI for Your Business with Modern Logic. I'm Andy Rahn. With me today is CEO
Dustin Bruzenak.
That's right. And today we're going to talk about a couple interesting things that have popped up in the news. AI coming back from the dead and some interesting new numbers from Gartner. And then we'll dig into, is AI coming for your job? I have a pink slip here for you, Dustin, somewhere, I think.
Excellent. I really look forward to growing corn. I think I can handle a single corn plant, though, so that'll be the next 20 years of my life, is just taking care of a single corn plant.
Great.
Staring at the blue sky and dreaming of the future. Where no more profit and loss reports unless it relates to a single corn cost on my corn plant.
Just focus on your corn. Great. Love it. So thanks so much for joining us, and stay tuned.
What have you read over the last week or two that might be interesting?
I ran into a few interesting things. Again, listening to a podcast as I do, and ran across this story. It's actually from a couple of years ago, but the widow of singer-songwriter Lou Reed has actually worked with a university in Australia to create a AI chatbot that replicates the writing style of Lou Reed. And she loves to collaborate and talk to this AI. And it's this weird, it's interesting as like a writing companion. I could see that if you were used to writing with someone, to have a tool that could replicate their style and vocabulary, it could be an interesting thing. But since it's not just your collaboration companion, but also your spouse, it's a really strange idea to think that your loved ones might try to replicate you so they can hold on to you after you're gone.
We get into some dangerous potential mental health situations there, because it's not really a thinking AI. There's not really a mind there. If you believe Sam Altman, and I think this is much further off than he does, their goal is to produce a thinking AI. And at that point, I think the discussion is a little different. I think we need to relitigate that discussion, because then you have an actual being. But I could see wanting to leave a legacy. Everyone, especially as a business owner, my fellow business owners, we talk about legacy. What are we leaving behind? How are we impacting our communities? And I could see wanting to leave a repository of your knowledge to train the next generation of people.
I think,
I can see why you'd want to do it, but I also think it's incredibly dangerous.
Key for that, I think, is being involved in the creation of it before you are gone. To have someone do it in after you're gone, it just seems like it.
But who better than your spouse to make that decision? You're dead, so you're off onto other things. And so I think I agree with you. I think rights to your personality might be something that becomes a standard part of end-of-life planning.
Oh, yeah,
because
that
of the
makes
way
sense.
this technology works.
It's like actors with deep fake replicas. There was a story years ago about Bruce Willis that sold his identity. It turns out he hadn't. But they are able to create AI actors that look and behave just like the actor. Like Harrison Ford, as a young man, was in a recent Indiana Jones film. But he's not young anymore.
How great would it be as an actor if you could sell your likeness as a famous star and then never have to work again?
Yeah.
On the one side, I know, knowing people in theater and acting, it's about the creative output for them as well. And also, I know, because of the economics of the situation, though they're getting pennies on the dollar for their live performance because it costs them less. But there's a very dystopian way to view this, and there's a very utopian way. I think the way lies in the middle. The truth for me is, if the widow is getting any sort of amelioration of her grief for Lou Reed, that we have to consider that. We have to consider that it is creepy and it is weird and it is
I think it's not just about
strange
grieving
for
for her,
sure.
but also about a creative process and a legacy and remembering. And so some of those things might actually be good and healthy. Like I know that I collect sentimental things from my life and from the people around me, photographs and recordings. Is it really that much different? It's a way of reliving what they were.
And I think if you start referring to the bot as your grandfather, oh, I need
Yeah.
to talk to, and that's where I think we draw a line, a harder
Yeah.
line between, okay, now we're creating a crisis versus something that I think is worthy of having a nuanced view of. It's
It's
not
really
all bad,
interesting
it's not all good.
because,
My initial reaction to it is definitely, oh,
right,
that's kind of creepy,
on
right?
the face of it, it seems absurd, but it's interesting now that we're talking about it. It's like there's elements of how this might get normalized because there is some utility there, but there's some risk as well. Interesting.
And imagine, I'm a sci-fi buff, a future where the AI is a very good replica of you and it can, to some degree, and think and reason like you would. What does that mean for legacy when your entire family is in a computer somewhere and you can go and at least have a reasonable approximation of a conversation with two, three generations ago, your grandfather? It'd be a fascinating piece of technology. And I don't know that humanity would be worse for it. I don't know that we're ready for something like that. But I also think the initial reaction of it being negative is probably bad. And any initial reaction where you're like, it's extremely positive and we should all do it is also probably not the right. I think the reaction is more nuanced and we have to wait and see, like any technology. And it's fascinating that AI has even enabled that this conversation. But what we do know now is that any AI you train is not a human being. It's not a person. It can
No,
only replicate some incredibly tiny and possibly very bad version of
kind of
that person.
superficial. Yeah.
Superficial.
Yeah.
And we know on the other side that teenagers and other people interacting with AI are having mental health crises. And so I think at this moment in time, it's more likely to do harm than good.
Certainly. Yep. Yep.
I'm not a
Great.
psychologist either.
No,
So,
I'm not,
um,
but interesting. Okay. So that's just something I ran across. How about you?
yeah, so I ran across a Gartner report, and Gartner, however you feel about them, I do think some of the reporting is really good. And they said that 61% of modern B2B buyers prefer to buy without human contact. And I've been seeing this as I talk to especially manufacturing companies and field services companies that have legacy. The new generation of owners is used to communicating asynchronously. They do their research, they go to the web, they grew up with the web. They
This is
don't,
amazing. So you're
yeah.
not talking about consumers that are buying stuff on Amazon. That makes sense to me. You're talking about business owners negotiating complicated, nuanced business interactions without talking to a person.
So I think it's more if I want to go and buy a crane or a truck for my business. Let's imagine I have a landscaping company and I'm buying a new fleet of trucks. I'm fully capable of going online. I know what I need out of those vehicles and saying, and going and potentially looking at other field service owners and what they're using, and then saying, okay, I know that I need this particular fleet of trucks. Why would I then call the company? I know what I want. I want to just be able to put a credit card in and buy the thing. And maybe at the end, there's a perfunctory conversation with a sales guy. When you call a salesperson, what you're going to get, they're going to try to upsell you. They're going to try to sell you the warranty. It's going to take an hour, and maybe it's going to take 3 or 4 meetings, and then you're going to get into contracting. That's 2 meetings, and vendor management. That's another meeting, and then you're going to have to bring your leadership team in, and that's your time times your lead. So buying B2B is a pain in the butt, and it's been a pain in the butt for a really long time. And so this new generation, the generation below you and me, has been used to this. They have the internet, they have text messaging, and the old generation of businesses, it was all built on, I call my sales guy over
Mm.
vendor two and I buy the same part I've always bought. And now the I think legitimately the next generation of business owners is coming in and saying, why would I be that inefficient? I know what I want. I just want to be able to click a few buttons. And how does that relate to AI? I think AI, we as you and me sitting here, and a lot of business owners I talk to are really hesitant to have their customers communicate with something that they know is an AI, like a chat bot or replacement for the phone calling service that has an AI driven thing. And we've all used automated systems that are annoying. But I think on the other side, if done well, what we're seeing in the polling is that people would actually prefer that. A
We're
bit of
seeing two
social
sides to this.
anxiety.
There's
Yeah.
the people who are doing the buying are sending a message because they're not picking up the phone and calling. They're just finding what they can on the web and making a decision based on that. If you are a supplier to other businesses and your services and products aren't well described on your website, you're losing business because people are not going to call your sales line to find out what you have. That's what I'm
And
hearing. And I've
I
even
think also I'd go even further and say if they're not described on your website, using something, I think one of the terms I saw is answer engine optimization, using optimization that AI can understand. More and more, these business owners are going to be communicating with Gemini and Claude
because
and that is going to be the thing reading your website. So you need to make sure your website is structured
right, because
well.
what I'm saying is probably not news to anyone because I'm sure anyone who's had a sales line has seen call volume drop to a trickle compared to what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. But what's new today is okay, so you knew you had to move to the web, but now it has to be optimized for AI. So you just said that answer engine optimized. I think that's a new term we haven't talked about before.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was a new term to me because honestly, there's two or three terms for the new SEO. It basically, for lack of a word, replaces SEO, and it's more instead of SEO is about optimizing for search. This is about optimizing for those little snippets that come up when you search that are auto-generated AI summaries, or when you go into ChatGPT and you ask it a question and then it crawls someone's website. You need to structure your information in a way that the AI can broadly understand, and there's ways to do that better, and there's ways to do that worse. And if the more and more, I don't think it is a stretch to assume that the vast majority of searching the internet will be replaced by AI very quickly. It's
Oh yeah,
already like half the searches,
it's
and
already
in the next few years, we're gonna. If I were Google, I'd be looking at my search engine funding, and I'm sure they are going, "What are we replacing this with?" Because even I rarely use Google anymore. It's okay, have my AI go and find the things that I want, do the research, and then give me the links, and then I'll click through to the links. But people aren't even clicking on the links.
this is why Google's
Back to the
invested so much in putting the AI front and center because they saw this coming too.
Yeah,
But
they
the
want to make sure you're still inside the Google box
yeah,
when you get that result. But I think on the other side, it's not just about optimizing your website for AI, it's about creating more consultative ways that the technology can help the buyer make decisions because you're not able to get on the phone and do that upsell, even though the client might need to have been upsold. One of
yeah,
the companies I'm talking to does mats for construction companies for like big cranes. Think about big plastic mats to help stabilize the surface that heavy equipment sits on. And sometimes the thing that the buyer wants isn't going to support the crane in the situation that the crane is going to be in. They're going to go and they're going to have the crane leaning way over.
sure. So
And
it's
so, how do you help the buyer make a decision? It's more than just if you need this, it might be a more interactive tool that helps the client or helps the buyer calculate which thing do I need and actually make some suggestions. If you're thinking about using it for this scenario, which it
it's
sounds like you are,
complicated. So if you
yeah,
have a complicated business offering and people are making their buying decision entirely on the web, how do you present that material so they know which of these myriad options they need?
yeah.
And
And
yeah, so it could be a
the
tool,
other
it could be
thing
a
I would
chat
say
bot, it
is,
could be yeah.
as someone who has social anxiety and have met plenty of business owners enough to realize that many business owners and buyers, part of it is just we talk to people all the time and we have some social exhaustion or anxiety. And I just want to get my thing done and not make another phone call and get out of the office for the day. If you could give me an interface and just we're very honest, this is a chat bot. We're not recording anything. We're just, you can just go, it knows everything about our catalog. That to some degree is a little freeing because then I can just be blunt with it. I don't have to do social niceties. I can get my job
Yeah.
done and I can get out of the office and go watch Netflix or whatever my evening plan happens to be, make dinner with my
Sure.
wife. So I think part of it too is let's cater to that audience. Let's use these technologies to enhance that experience. And at the same time, for you, it's reducing the workload on your business. It's reducing the number of call center call
It's
queuing.
reducing the support and, sorry, real time costs. But now you have to go through the trouble of making sure that your marketing materials in your website adequately show all of the things that you're selling. And in fact, it might actually be good for you to, I know that even for our business, we're thinking about how do we define the products that we're going to be offering in this new AI space. If we want people to be able to do what you're saying and buy it without human contact, we have to be really good about describing what those things are and putting a stake in the ground that says, this is what we do. We can't just have a salesperson try to like ad lib, wing it, and say, oh, we also do that.
Pro services companies in particular, I think marketing and so on need to show more than tell in a lot of these situations. And I think that's been true for decades. The more you show. But there's definitely a lot of catch up being driven by these changes in behavior. I think AI is one of the solutions that we can reach to solve some of these problems, even for ourselves. And I think it's really easy to look at trends like this and think they're bad, but there's also these are all there's good positives and there's negatives. And I think as long as you're looking at what opportunities does this create for me to create competitive advantage, to be better at this than my competitors. And sure, maybe someone's probably not going to buy $1 million piece of technology by just putting their credit card in on a website. That's absurd, right? But how much further can we get? Are there smaller upfront offerings? Are there ways we can be more empathetic and compassionate towards the user who might want to be much further down the buying funnel before they have that $1 million conversation?
Yeah,
Is there a way? Is there something that they can? What can we give them to make sure once they have that conversation that it's worth their time?
that makes sense.
All right, so let's dive right into our main topic. And I think today, Andy and I, we were going to talk about something else. And in prep for this, we ended up in a debate. And
Yeah.
we paused and we were like, hey, this is probably something other people are thinking about. Maybe it's worth sharing. And full honesty, we don't know what the answer is here, which is, does AI replace employees? And I think on the surface, the answer is not yet, not at least every employee or most employees.
I know we've certainly been beating the drum on our side of right now AI where it's at is a great tool for enhancing the capabilities of your employees. It's a brand new tool in their arsenal to get rid of the mundane and accelerate creative thinking. But as you pointed out earlier, I've always worked in a very diverse, complicated role in my job, doing a lot of different things between management, software engineering, creative decisions, or client services, all kinds of things. So it's hard to replace me because I don't do just one thing. But there might be job roles at some businesses where people are much more limited in the scope of what their activities are during the day. And who's to say that role might be something that is not going to be as needed in the future.
I think this gets back to the days when you and I both worked in the early days of digital photography at Adobe, which is the same conversation was being had around replacing the film photography experience with digital cameras.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of changes to that whole industry driven by the fact that the cost per photo was being driven way, way down.
Yep.
And there were a lot of people's livelihoods that were threatened by that. And I think what we've seen over time is I would be surprised if the photography business on the lower end in terms of individuals or small businesses wasn't smaller than it was in term prior to digital photography, or at least they're making money in different ways. And I remember that conversation, and I think part of it was that it was an inevitable sea change. It was the industrial revolution for photography. I think we're sitting here at the same moment for jobs that involve things that computers can now easily do. And as a business owner, we lead with compassion. It's one of our core values. We try to make decisions around, here at Modern Logic, around what is the right thing for not just ourselves, but for our community and our employees. And I think a lot of small and mid-sized businesses are ethical and they think the same way. But I also think it's bad for me to hire people that I don't need.
Yeah.
That jeopardizes my ability to stay competitive. that jeopardizes my ability to keep the entity alive and keep paying for everyone.
We need
And
to, when
especially as
we
people
hire
get more
someone,
expensive.
they need to be competitive in the industry and bringing value to the business that justifies their cost. And as these new technologies come on board, our competitors are going to take advantage of them. And so they'll be able to cut their costs. Like this is how capitalism works. You have to keep up. And yeah, it sucks though to just say, yeah, we're going to replace all our employees with AI.
And I think that's where therein lies the fallacy is we're going to replace all our employees with AI, because that's just, I think, objectively not true. You're not going to replace yourself with AI. As much as I would love the box to be a robot version of Dustin and I'm off playing video games or watching TV or going on a walk with my wife around the lake, I think we are far away from that future. And none of us as business owners want that. I think when I go and talk to other business owners, what comes alive is we have a lot of creative people that we really enjoy working with that are doing good work for our business, and they're spending 80+% of their time work that computers can do that they hate. They don't,
Yeah.
and we do have whole roles in our company. A lot of them are unfilled because we can't even find people that want to do them, and
We have a lot of people
that could be
wearing a lot of
replaced with
hats,
technology.
and they're not excited about all the hats they have to put on. And so it is really cool to think, you know what? We can minimize how much time you have to spend doing that aspect of just this turn the crank drudge work with some simple automation using AI. I'm excited about that. And I think, yeah, does that mean our company might have fewer employees than a similar firm might have had 20 years ago? That absolutely is true. That's what progress means. When they say every year they report employees are 20% more productive than they were last year, that's basically a way of saying 1 in 5 employees was no longer needed.
And we've seen this with the invention of the car engine and the invention, and we've seen this with the Industrial Revolution on a broader scale. We saw that with digital photography. There are these big technology transitions. This is just a really large one. The closest comparison is the Industrial Revolution. And there was 10 to 20, 30 years of pretty big disruption. And I think we do need to be prepared for that as a society. And what I try to think of is, as a business owner, what piece of this am I responsible for, both in terms of returning to my owners and being good for my employees and being good to the community, and what am I not responsible for? Where I fall is I need to be out there having these conversations and pushing a human-centered narrative around how we should use AI for good, and trying to, as a leader, and this is something I advocate to other leaders, think about and understand where my line is for the ethics of the position. Who am I willing to replace and who am I not willing to replace?
Yeah.
And for me, we aren't replacing whole people. And you're seeing this in the numbers. People aren't largely replacing whole people, at least not yet, but they aren't backfilling positions. And that, I think, if I can do something that I can't even find a body for, that's a reasonable place to use AI. And I think in that case, our business will be able to punch above its weight, and then that will generate money that then goes back into the market, and there will be new jobs eventually created. But there's whole other sections, like what does the education system need to look like in order to graduate people at a level where they are hireable in a world where the first 2 years of a postgraduate career are producing work that a computer can now do. And that is a challenge that I think we have to handle as a society, that it's too much to try to bear that yoke as a small business.
I would say more direct concerns for a business owner are there's so much propaganda, you might say, being injected into this space right now. AI just agreed with Oracle to invest $300 billion in new data centers over the next 10 years or something. So the amount of money that's being poured in from venture capital and SoftBank and all these things is mind-boggling. So they are clearly invested in making sure that everyone is adopting these technologies. So along with that might come some spin, obviously, right? They're going to say it can do more than it does. So the first concern is make sure that you actually evaluate these things critically. Something I've noticed for myself is when I use AI to solve a task that I'm not particularly good at myself, I'm blown away. But when I go and ask it to do a task that I'm actually an expert on, I'm usually like, I see what you're trying to do here, but then I have to fix it. And so you probably should make sure you have someone who actually knows what the right answer is to verify that the things that it's generating are good enough. Because otherwise, you might actually, if you put a bunch of marketing content out there that was all AI generated that you didn't look at critically, it probably will look AI generated. It might actually do the opposite of what you're hoping. Instead of making it look good, it'll make you look fabricated and false. The other concern I have is, and I don't know how real this is the cost of using these technologies actually reflective of the actual cost, or are we seeing like a VC subsidized rate? So they're trying to hook you on the free and the whatever, and then when you try to grow and your business is tied intimately into it, are they going to do a rug pull and the costs are going to jump up? I don't know, but it's something I think about. Do you think that's a possibility?
I think it's certainly when we talk about cost, the costs will go up. But I also think when you look at ChatGPT's own numbers, the cost of training their models has fallen by something like 280x over the last year and a half. And so they are exceeding Moore's law in terms of the cost of training these models. And there will be a time where good enough is a fairly cheap thing. So I don't think I'm a bit of an optimist from this perspective, but I think that when you just look at the evidence, I don't think we're going to live in a world where the modern business is paying through the nose for tokens because it's not worth that to you. And the people producing the technology know that, and they're investing heavily in making good enough solutions that are will be far more sophisticated than the off-the-shelf AI is today. And I think we can reliably count on the technology continue to be driven forward to the point where the cost is effective. But I do think there will be models that are much, much more expensive than they are today. And there will be places where those models get used for much more valuable things. And there will be, as a business owner or as an AI buyer, you're going to need to be a sophisticated buyer in a way that maybe none of us are today around what am I paying for? What am I getting? Very similar to what we do with Amazon economics today. It's very common for us to go into a managed service client, and see, okay, we can cut your Amazon bill down to 20, 30%.
Right,
At
Amazon
least,
Web
right?
Services bill.
Amazon Web Services bill, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see the same thing. You're going to have a whole cottage industry of AI experts that can help businesses. Okay, you don't need to be using GPT-5 for this. You can be using GPT Mini on your own computer to do the same thing if we train it well. And that's going to deliver for a fraction of the cost, of the token cost
Sure.
of the overall
Well,
AI
if
models.
I project forward, there's a couple things that are, it's challenging because it's such a rapidly evolving environment. But one thing is the idea that these general purpose models are going to be the right solution for everything. That's probably going to change. As you even mentioned, there's a choice of models between the mini and the thinking version. But they just released, was it Anthropic, a model tuned to financial services industry?
Yep.
That will continue to happen, that they might actually start to be commercially available models that are tuned to your industry. That's one change that'll be coming. And of course, for larger businesses, they can train or at least fine tune these models using data themselves to really make a proprietary model.
I think fine tuning is going to be an incredible source of competitive advantage for even small and mid-sized
Yeah.
businesses over the next 5 years. And no one's talking about fine tuning because the business audience is still grappling with what can I get out of these publicly available off-the-shelf interfaces like
Right.
ChatGPT-5. But when I go talk to business owners, I try to, you need to peek a little bit under the covers and say, how do I make sure that my data that I'm collecting is a competitive advantage going to the future
Yeah.
that I can use to reinforce and fight against the fact that the costs of everything other than imported goods is going to continue to go down, especially any sort of information technology. And really in the world where that happens, your data, how you, not just how you do business, but who you do business with, what their interests are, what value you're getting across the spectrum of the people that you're serving, how do we use that to reinforce and get better at what we're doing? And part of that is creating something we call like a data lake that is a central source of data, and then sitting an AI on top of it, very similar to people talking about data marts and business analytics in
But
the
the
last
thing is,
15
any
years.
small business will be doing this in the future. Your
Right.
data that you own is of huge value for powering your business going forward. Yeah. The
So
other,
back to the AI like employee topic, I think
I had one other
okay.
topic kind of idea on that, which is we're thinking of AI as replacing an employee because ChatGPT really crystallized the concept of how you could interact with AI through a conversation. And what's interesting is that's not how GPTs were originally designed to be used. They did not think of them as a conversational back and forth AI tool. They thought them as a language generation tool. And that is probably still one of their more valuable uses. And so instead of thinking of AI as someone whose butt is sitting in a chair, it is more like a new way of using computers because we're used to thinking of computers as very algorithmic and logical. 2 plus 2 equals 4, always true. Why is the sky blue? Computer can't answer that. Or why am I happy today? Computers can't address that question. But with large language models, they can start to get into that sort of fuzzy logic realm of looking at amorphous data that's not just integers being added together in a mathematical proof, but you can start to say, hey, tell me what are the key topics in this body of text. Or I'm trying to build some workflow where I have a database with millions of rows of data and we just don't have time to write code that is a precise data transformation operation to move that from one place in my business to another. Instead, you could start to build little transformation bots that take data from one place and move it to another. It's something you would never do with a human being. You would never just on a whim say, hey, I need to transform a million rows in this database. Let's go. It would be
You'd
way
be
too costly.
surprised how
I know.
much of the corporate world is people transferring data. One of my first jobs was transferring data from one spreadsheet to
But
another.
if it was
And
an
I automated
enterprise,
it and got promoted. But I think largely and broadly that's true. It's what can we one of the questions I asked myself is what can we do that we couldn't do before?
right. And
This
that's what really
podcast, I think, is a
excites me.
direct result of AI. We would never have even had the time to think about being able to do this podcast if we hadn't removed some of the
Yeah.
mundane workload
Yes.
of our day with AI. And I think this pairs well with my sort of ethical position, just to share where I'm at with AI and AI replacing employees. Because I think half of this is hard performance metrics, and half of it is who do you want to be when you grow up as a business? What is your legacy? What are you building in the future? And sort of where I go and draw the line is I will use AI for things that I would never pay for.
Right.
So, clip a good example, AI replacing artists. We have really strong opinions. Your wife is an artist. We strongly believe in especially small and local artists. We've been a sponsor of the community for a long time. We host artist websites. There's a very, very
Yeah.
tiny
It,
side thing we
it's
do.
certainly one of my personal passions that I think keeping that portion of humanity alive and thriving. I live in an arts district in Minneapolis for crying out loud. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really important.
And so where I draw the line is would I have paid someone or is it worth something to me? So clip art in my slide presentation that one group of people is going to see, probably not going to commission a local artist to draw me some clip art version of a light bulb for the ideas slide. That's not worth it to me. I'd rather just have a slide that doesn't even have clip art on it. But when we were talking about, okay, let's create an AI avatar for ourselves. We commissioned a local artist to create a robot for us. That's a real
Yeah.
physical. It's not an actual robot. It's an art piece, but it's a physical representation because this is something we're going to use across all of our marketing, and that
Yeah.
would be something we're paying for. And the reality is, art is pretty affordable, and artists are affordable, and that is a place where we're going to leverage that value. And I don't need to save money on that sort of thing. Maybe you could talk a little
Yeah.
about the robot.
Oh, he's
Hopefully, we
so
can put a link
cool.
to him in the show notes.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully, we can include a picture of him so you can see. Yeah, his name is Mlem, named by the artist.
It's a very
And he's posable, so he's got movable arms and head and his eyes. He can hold things. He's got a little door that opens and in his chest, so there could be different materials in there. And the whole design of the robot is so that it can be useful for our marketing materials. So hopefully, you'll be seeing adorable little robots on our blogs and newsletters and so forth. And I think that's a really fun way to counteract like the kind of soulless, antiseptic kind of sameness of AI generated material with here's some kind of fun and whimsy that's a breath of fresh air. I love being able to use these things where they're appropriate. and good.
Yeah, and I think when you're making a decision with respect to employees, the place that I would say is where's the value generated in my business and where's the value being lost in my business? And the value being lost in my business, those people, we need to bring them along for the ride. And they're usually creative people that we want to keep. We just don't want them doing the same spreadsheet operation or reformatting resumes manually or generating the same outreach over and over again because that's a waste of their creative talents. And I promise you, if you go talk to them, they don't like doing that either.
Yeah.
But can we move them onto more value generating sections of the business? We can all build a better business together and get rid of that drudgery with AI that actually isn't worth it to me, but it's the necessary evil that needs to be run. And I have a direct for this, which is most of my job and most of the jobs of other business owners that I talk to is drudgery. It's spending 2 hours reading through the email. It's scheduling meetings. It's reading and doing research on the internet for different SWOT analyses and market stuff. And but the value generation of the business is me being out talking to other business owners, me talking to our clients, me building relationships. And I can only allocate a small percentage of my time to do that because, as any business owner knows, all of the fires, the heat moves up, right? And we're sitting at the top in the pot. Don't cry for us, but our feet are pretty warm most of the time. And it feels sometimes like the business is running you instead of you running the business. And AI has really allowed me to remove whole chunks of that from my life. And I think what excites me about it is if I can take that and evangelize that to not just other business owners, but to my own employees and get them using the technology in the same way, we're all going to be happier with our jobs. We're going to relate to it better. We're going to be doing more creative work, more value, similar to what I'm doing now and continuing to improve over time. And there's a really optimistic, not utopian, but a very real way to apply this technology in a way that improves all of our lives. And I think it behooves us, especially as small and mid-sized business owners, to think about where's the line, how much money is enough, what do I want my legacy to be, and let's make some real decisions about where we're going to apply this technology in order to make the lives and the communities we live in better. And let's make sure we understand where those lines are in a way that we can maintain and retain being competitive, but we're also not laying off 60% of our workforce so that I can put $1 million more in my pocket this year and buy a bigger yacht. Like, doesn't motivate me. And for most business owners I know, it really doesn't motivate them either. And, but I think if you just live a relatively unexamined, if you adopt this technology in an unexamined way, it's very dangerous. And I promise you, your employees are having the same thoughts. And so it's worth thinking through just so you can articulate to them, here's where we're going to use it. Here's where we're not going to use it. I had a client I had lunch with 2 days ago, and I'm really excited now that I've seen what all AI can do. We're using it everywhere, and I actually have a meeting to talk about where not to use it. I'm like, that is a very useful conversation to have because there are places where it's not good enough yet. There are places where we shouldn't be replacing a human, and there are places where it's not worth replacing a human because that human is doing valuable creative work that humans are good at, and we love working with other humans. We're not gonna wake up one day and have a business of one
No,
and be
no,
happy.
exactly.
That's a pipe dream. So
It's not going to work. It's going to be too full of mistakes, and these systems have limitations. And so adopting them in a pragmatic way is key to make sure you stay successful.
All right, that gets us to, I think, our word of the day. What you want to take?
Do we really want to have a word of the day?
Like I think we can. I think we can blaze through it quickly. It's a light concept.
All right,
for people.
So thanks for bearing with us. Let's hit today's AI word of the day. This one it's actually an acronym. MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. And what it is, it allows ICE to be augmented with extra abilities. We talked, I think, a couple episodes back with Dylan about retrieval augmented generation, where you could use a database of information to allow an AI to look up stuff and learn on the fly. And really, MCP is an extension of that. it allows not only looking up data in a database, but really allows models to do just about anything you'd want it to. It could use an MCP to search the internet. It could use it to connect to a database on your intranet somewhere.
Into the CRM would be a really common one.
It can take actions like, composing a draft email, for example, adding annotations to CRM, or doing like I talked about, a data transformation kind of thing, where it might read data from one database and interpret it in some way and then put a summary of that data somewhere else and then iterate and continue. So it's really exciting because the cool thing about MCP is it's an open protocol. So all kinds of vendors around you will start to say, hey, our product has an MCP. Figma has an MCP. GitHub is
similar to an
MCP.
API.
Yeah, so it is like a variant of an API. So you can start to connect your AI tools to other tools that you work with and empower them to interact with those systems. And it's really the tip of the iceberg in terms of allowing AI to automate business flows across all these different systems.
It's a key component of the future agentic architectures that we're not quite ready for yet, but I think we can really see right around the corner, which is agentic's happening in places like coding, but I think we're going to see a broader use of agentic inside of all organizations as these old siloed businesses, pieces of technology that you invested in over years that you're not replacing, like your ERP, like Epicor or Epic, and now you're going to have the ability to marry the wonders of your modern AI technology with not just your data through RAG, but using MCPs to enable workflows and automations that you couldn't before. And so it's really exciting technology. It's still early, but you're going to start hearing more and more of that. You might hear people say, oh, this doesn't have an MCP. And in my head, I just translate as an old coder to, oh, it doesn't have an API that AIs can talk to. Like at a very broad level, application programming interface is how we used to talk to these systems. And then you can think of an MCP as an API that chat.
Although I will say, it's so early on that there are some really rough edges on MCPs. One is just security, but the other is context size. Some of these MCPs just dump so much information into the context. I don't know if we've talked about this, but basically context is how much memory an LLM can keep in its head at once. And once that's full, it's incapable of taking on any new instructions. And so there's now been discussions and people are building kind of MCPs of MCPs that help it choose which ones to activate so as to minimize which are in its memory all at once. So that'll be an ongoing deal. I think we'll just have to keep tabs on that to see how that evolves.
It's coming rapidly, though. I think we're going to see a lot more in change and improvement over the next 6 months. All right, so that ends our episode.
Thanks for joining us. This has been really fun talking about these things today. I do want to have some quick shout outs. Thanks to all the editing and production work by Ryan Peterson. We also have additional content provided by other folks on our team, Dylan Bruzenak, Anna Spitz, and Beth Davis. Join us again in 2 weeks for another episode.